I've often thought that Jaeger-LeCoultre is a brand that I wanted to consider as a possible luxury watch purchase. Join me as I explore their current catalog to see if there are any watches that captivate me and you. And stick around to the end to see which watches I think are possible additions to my collection. Did you follow my search for a mid-tier luxury watch last year? I ended up buying the Tudor Black Bay 58 and have been extremely happy with my selection ever since. Now it's time for me to look for and consider a luxury watch. Watches that I classify as retailing for $6,000 or more. On this episode of Adventures with Time, I explore the watches of Jaeger-LeCoultre, also known as JLC, to see what they have to offer. Maybe you or I will find a watch that not only attracts us, but one with which we are enthralled. Now, when I consider a watch from these big brands, I want to look at their catalog online to be able to not only narrow down what I'm going to look at in the store, but also to make sure I don't miss some hidden gem. And this is an appropriate strategy for me now, since all of the local ADs and boutiques around me are closed because of stay-at-home orders. Once they're open again, then I'll be prepared to look at some specific watches that are of interest to me. In case you're not familiar with Jaeger-LeCoultre, let me give you the briefest of backgrounds. JLC started out in 1833 under Antoine Lecoultre, making watches and precision measuring instruments. They made calipers for several watchmakers, including Patek Philippe. In 1903, Lecoultre formed a partnership with Edmond Jaeger to develop watches. Over the years, they contributed many innovations to timekeeping. And in 1931, they came out with the iconic Reverso watch. Their partnership was formalized as Jaeger-LeCoultre in 1937 and continues today. Like many major watch brands, JLC has a large catalog of watches. However, they have them grouped into collections, where the watches within each collection have a common theme. Let's review each of those collections to see which watches we want to consider further. And I'll start with perhaps the best known of their collections, which is the Reverso. As I said before, the Reverso collection started in the early 1930s out of the need for a watch to be used by polo players, something that they could use to protect the crystal so that it doesn't get damaged during play. Hence the Reverso, where you can turn the watch case around and hide the crystal. Now, the Reverso has many models, but it basically comes down to, at least for men, 3 sizes. The small, at a size of 35.8 by 21 millimeters. The medium, 40 by 24.5 millimeters, or the large, at 45.5 by 27.5 millimeters. And of course, there are varieties within that. In addition to the size and the dial style, there are a lot of other options, such as small seconds, precious metal cases. They even have them with triple date, moon phase, and even a tourbillon. Just looking at the stainless steel models, not the precious metals, there's the duo face, which has a standard dial on the front, and on the back is a second dial, which you can use to keep track of another time zone. I actually tried this one on in a store, and it looked really good to me. The other basic option is the classic style, with a single dial on the front, but where the watch case can be flipped around to show just a plain protective metal case. My understanding is that a lot of people use this side to engrave their initials or some design to make it something special. Next up is the Rendezvous collection. This is a collection of women's watches starting out at $7,300, going all the way up to $100,000, many adorned with diamonds. The Master Collection seems to be divided into three ranges of watches: the Master Ultra Thin, the Master Control, and the Master Grand Tradition. In all of these ranges, you'll find round dress watches in various metal types, both stainless steel and precious metal. And they all have different levels of complications, all the way up to the Master Grand Tradition, which include tourbillons. Of interest to me here is the Master Ultra Thin Small Seconds, a traditional dress watch that, while being understated, seems to exude some elegance and style with its crisp, clean dial and simple hour markers. Similar to this is the Master Control Date, which also has a very clean dial, but includes Arabic numerals at the 12, 6, and 9, with a nicely trimmed date window at the 3 o'clock hour. Both of these have display case backs so you can see the nice movement. Following in the theme of these two watches is the Master Ultra Thin Moon, which takes the plain hour indices from the ultra thin seconds and adds a moon phase complication surrounded by a date wheel, giving you a dress watch with a bit more interest having that moon complication. Now we come to the Polaris collection, which is more of a sporting set of watches. Everything from a simple timing bezel through calendar, chronograph, and even including world timing functions. I was able to try on the Polaris Automatic recently at a local AD. A nice watch, but I'm not sure it's to my liking, especially the blue dial. I'm not a very big fan of blue dial watches. But the Polaris watches seem to be popular among watch enthusiasts. The Geophysic collection is mostly watches that have world time functionality, but most of them include what they call true second engineering, with the second-hand steps right onto the second indicators, rather than a sweeping movement. You'll note that it includes the Geophysic True Second, a watch very similar to the Master Ultra Thin collection, but slightly more expensive, I assume, given that True Second engineering. The Duomet collection consists of a few highly engineered, very sophisticated watches, which incorporate this dual wing concept, where separate powertrains and gears to run the regulating function of the watch versus the complications of the watch, therefore enabling each to act independently and not impact the other. The Hybris Mechanica collection is a set of limited edition watches where JLC seems to have unleashed the creativity of their watchmakers to produce some very special watches. So here are my thoughts. There are three watches that are of interest to me. First, one of the iconic Reverso models. After one selects an appropriate size, and for me that's probably large, the next decision is whether to go for a dual face watch or one of the original classics with the blank back. I don't have much need for tracking 2 time zones, and I already have a GMT watch for that purpose. So I'll go with the classic model with the small seconds. As the name applies, this is the classic. Next is a watch from the Master Collection. These embody the classic dress watch. However, I'd want to spruce it up a bit with the moon phase complication. This watch has that refined look that, without being ostentatious, to me exudes style and elegance. Now I feel like I should consider the Polaris collection. However, to me, these watches appear flat. Even if you move up to the Polaris chronograph, there doesn't seem to be anything special about the design. I do want to see one of the chronographs in person to make sure I give it its just consideration. But assuming I would feel no different about the Polaris once I tried it on the wrist, that leaves me with two watches under consideration. the large size Reverso Classic with small seconds, and the Master Ultra Thin Moon Watch. Here's my problem though. Both of these watches are beautiful, and either one I would love to have in my collection. But I'm concerned about versatility. That is, how many activities would they be appropriate to wear, especially the Reverso. Yes, it was originally designed for polo players and therefore should be considered a sports watch, but I think it feels more like a dress watch. I feel the same about the Master Moon Watch in that it's a dress watch. When I think about my previous new normal days, that is after my retirement in January and before the stay-at-home conditions started in March, I live a very casual lifestyle. Either of these would be great for an office situation, but I don't go to work anymore. These days, I'm either in shorts or blue jeans, and very rarely dress up. Now, I realize these are just my opinions and perhaps my flaws as a watch collector. I'd love to hear yours, especially those of you who have one of these watches or any of the similar models. In what situations do you wear them? In any event, I think I need to wait to see what my thoughts are after we get back to a more social set of activities. When I'm actually out and about, I can ask myself, how would I feel with one of these watches on my wrist? I hope you enjoyed this survey of JaegerLeCoultre watches. And do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video.